Good afternoon and welcome to the News Roundup for Thursday, December 11, 2025. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. Governor Tim Walz on the hot seat once again, this time for grossly exaggerating much-needed fraud audits in Minnesota's troubled Medicaid program. That guy just can't seem to stay out of trouble. A shocking claim by Democrats that the Pentagon is donating billions of dollars to the Trump administration's immigration enforcement efforts, potentially leaving the U.S. military vulnerable. And major car makers in the U.S. issue a dire warning saying the Chinese communist regime poses a clear and present danger to our country's entire auto industry. Also, the Trump administration seizing an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, and we'll share breaking developments. And Time Magazine names its Person of the Year for 2025, and this go-around, it's definitely not who you think. All this and a bunch more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin here as Minnesota continues to reckon with the explosive fallout from their massive billion-dollar fraud scandal. Yeah, a number of lawmakers are now, they're putting the blame squarely on the shoulders of Governor Tim Walz. And to make things worse, we've now discovered that he's continuing to mislead voters about what he's doing to repair the damage. Well, this mess just keeps getting worse by the hour, and yeah, it's kind of difficult to keep up. The governor's critics are now saying that by failing to uphold his oath of office and protect taxpayer money, Walz is the real culprit behind those wretched scams, which allegedly skimmed more than $1 billion, all from the state's coffers, making his state of Minnesota our nation's largest COVID-19 fraud case. Well, like they say, go big or go home. Now, Walz, he's hemming and hawing and dodging questions about the steps which his administration is currently taking to uncover fraud in his state's Medicaid program. The governor says repeatedly that Minnesota's Department of Health Services, or DHS, has hired an independent auditor to investigate more than a dozen Medicaid-related programs. However, he's been leaving out one very important detail. That auditor only has the authority to review an extremely small number of claims. According to reports, the investigation has no power at all to look into Medicaid payments, which run through a bunch of nonprofit managed care organizations, and those expenses make up the vast majority of the spending. Not surprisingly, a number of furious state lawmakers are now in an uproar over the matter. They say they feel completely misled by the governor's convoluted message regarding the audit, and that most of the fraud likely beyond the scope of that investigation. For their part, the governor's team says that Walz doesn't talk about the limits of the audit because he thinks it'll be too complicated for people to understand. They also say they've limited their probe due to deals they've cut with all those managed care companies who are each responsible for their own internal audits. What good does that do? A number of people, they've already been charged with stealing millions of dollars from the state by billing Medicaid for related housing services they never provided, and authorities believe that's just the tip of the iceberg. And meanwhile, the Trump administration's Medicaid chief, that guy, Dr. Oz, he has put Walz on notice and given him 60 days, just a couple of months to clean up that massive mess. He's threatening to cut off federal funding entirely, saying that the two-time governor was asleep at the wheel while scammers used taxpayer money to buy luxury cars, also snazzy homes, and potentially finance al-Qaeda-linked terrorists. This is getting deeper by the minute. Final thoughts. This is the News Roundup Lowdown. And newsflash, one of the best ways to eliminate Medicaid fraud in Minnesota and in every state, but mostly Minnesota, is to have in place a system of checks and balances, full transparency as well, and a little-known thing called accountability. To make things worse, the system in Governor Timbo's state is so mired in fraud that outside auditors, they've been called in, and their mission is to uncover something which the rest of us, we already know about. Fraud to the tune of $1 billion in this place. Pranav, if you would please, another graphic of Walsneyland. Yes, I love theme parks, and that one's a doozy. That's where admission is free, but you pay to get out. Look, if I'm a Minnesota taxpayer, I'd bail out of that state quicker than Kamala Harris ditched Joe Biden when she ran for president. Remember that time, Davey?
Oh, yeah, Bill. We all remember.
Yeah, just a couple of months back. Tim Walz is, for now, the governor of Minnesota, and on his watch, there's been an epic level of fraud. Taxpayers, they're on the hook. People who should have received health care and more, they were left in the lurch. Far too many nefarious characters. They got rich. And to make things worse, guess who's going to foot the bill for all this ineffective auditing? John Q., state and federal taxpayer. That's folks just like you and I. Also, think on this. In the state of Minnesota, if it was a company that Walz actually owned, I guarantee he would have run his business far better than he's running his state. And if this gets to your belly like it does to me, leave us a comment. Tell us what you're thinking. And a lot of folks have been writing in. And producer Davey, I know the governor wants us to go away and leave him alone, but look, people have gotten ripped off. We want a full accounting of what happened and why, and the Timmer needs to tell the whole country what went wrong on his watch. And what are you thinking right now?
Well, the question is, how is anyone supposed to get to the bottom of this if they can't even look at the books? I mean, the whole thing sounds a bit dodgy to me.
Yeah, from day one, it's a mess. And some in Camp Walz, they will argue that the governor is not corrupt. But at the very least, come on, he's incompetent. He's in over his head. And we should all thank our lucky stars that I Know Nothing Walz never became the vice president of the USA. What a tragedy that could have become. Turning now to an outrageous claim made by a group of more than a dozen Democrats on Capitol Hill who say the Trump administration's efforts to secure our border have actually made our country less safe. That doesn't add up, but I'll listen in. According to a new report, the Pentagon has been using more than $2 billion of their own funds to support the president's immigration operations, and the lawmakers argue that move has both damaged national security and put our service members at risk. I disagree, but that's their take. The report says that more than $1 billion in diverted Defense Department money was originally earmarked to build new military facilities in both the U.S. and Germany, and instead it was siphoned off, they say, used to pay for the deployment of troops along our country's southern border with Mexico. Additionally, the document says hundreds of millions of dollars in Pentagon funds were used to finance the deployment of the National Guard in a number of troubled U.S. cities, as well as for the detention of immigrants at American military bases and all around the world. And furthermore, the report claims that some of the Defense Department's cash was used to help out the Department of Homeland Security by paying for military flights used to deport illegal immigrants. And that's a move that Democratic lawmakers call a baffling waste of military resources. What do they know? Now, according to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, several critical military exercises have also either been scaled back or canceled entirely due to the deployment of U.S. service members to immigration operations. For their part, the Pentagon points out that they have an annual budget of nearly $1 trillion, giving them the flexibility to carry out a whole bunch of missions and all at the same time. Yeah, it's something called multitasking. Now, final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Our friends on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats, they're telegraphing a false and a dangerous narrative to the rest of the world when they call into question the level of readiness of our U.S. military. All branches of our armed forces are 100% of the time prepared for any and all contingencies, right here at home and all over the planet, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're kind of like Denny's. They never close. For congressional Democrats to suggest otherwise, it's kind of a two-pronged dilemma. First up, they're suggesting to their fellow Americans, our fellow Americans, that our military is currently in a compromised position, and they're not. And that's absolutely not true. More importantly, they're telling our adversaries in China, also North Korea, Iran, and any number of terrorist organizations all over the world that we're easy pickings. And it sounds like they're pretty much inviting danger to our very shores. Clearly, the comments which certain congressional Democrats are making ignores the fact that money is being spent by this administration right now to protect and fortify our border, critical to national security. And illegal immigration is now finally in check. Also, money's allocated to deploy National Guard troops to clean up and protect some of our country's crime-riddled big cities. In the overall scheme of things, kind of a drop in the bucket when weighed against public safety and quality of life. No, Democrats, our U.S. military readiness is never compromised, and your comments are horribly irresponsible. And Producer Davey, I say we're always at the ready, and tell me what you're thinking. What's on your mind?
I mean, come on, Bill. Right now, the U.S. military is the finest fighting force in the entire world, plain and simple.
Absolutely. Look, the world is right now, and I really believe this, the world is right now dangling on the precipice of World War III, and a bunch of ne'er-do-well Democrats are trying to advance the process. It's just absolutely reprehensible, and it's got to stop. All right, stick around Washington just a bit longer and pivot now to an ominous warning from the U.S. auto industry concerning the extreme threat of China's Communist Party. Right now, a group of automakers sounding the alarm on Capitol Hill and desperately urging lawmakers to prevent the communist regime from opening up a bunch of manufacturing plants right here stateside in the U.S., claiming they are a clear and present danger to our entire nation. The group includes most of the major players like GM, Ford, Toyota, and all the rest, and urging the Trump administration to act right away. They say that by subsidizing automakers and battery manufacturers around the world, Communist China is flooding the market with less expensive items, making it impossible to compete no matter how much they invest. They're now asking Congress to uphold our nation's current ban on the import of Chinese-made automobiles and other relevant technology by keeping the communist regime from setting up shop here on our home turf. Now, as one congressman very clearly points out, China has recently grown to become the world's largest auto exporter by shipping out millions of vehicles at below market prices, which car makers around the world simply can't match. Furthermore, he says the communist regime has turned the auto industry into a tool of the state through their crafty methods, very crafty, very sneaky, including by controlling supply chains, underwriting expenses, and through all of their predatory regulations. I hope this is ringing some bells and you got start thinking about this. Send us some comments. Tell us what you're thinking about this, and I'm mortified by it. I'm frightened by it. And final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. The major automakers here in the States, they're stating the obvious. But keeping China-backed companies from setting up shop and operating here in the States, just a portion of the problem. And clearly, we have to ensure that China is not permitted to gain a substantial market share here in the U.S. by prohibiting them from shipping their cars and trucks to us. And right now, the last thing any of us needs to do is drive by one of those BYD car dealerships on Main Street with those swooper flags that read, "Sale, we finance, new arrivals." Yeah, but we don't want those Chinese-made cars. None of us want to spend a wad of dough on a ride made in China. With the proceeds from the sale of that car, you know where it's going. It's going to support the Chinese Communist Party. Something else to consider. Today, the average price of a new car here in the USA, about $50 large, which puts those rides out of the reach for far too many of us. So Ford, GM, all the rest, try dumbing down the price just a pinch to ensure that you stay competitive. Also, think about the quality of the build. Seems like every couple of days there's another recall. Tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of cars and trucks always being recalled. People are doling out a wad of dough for that new rig. Make sure it's not going to get yanked out of their driveway in just a couple of weeks. Hey, producer Dave, just kind of curious. If you could buy a new ride, one of those rides made in China, BYD, or any of the rest of them, at the right price, would you take the dive? Would you give it a shot?
Absolutely not, Bill. Way too many security issues. And look, allowing the Communist Party to set up shop here, that's just a bad idea. It
is a bad idea, any way you think about it. And I think it's just unfortunately a matter of time, though, before cars made in China will be available here in the States. But safety and security issues for me as well, Davey, that's going to keep me away. And for a little while longer, I'm going to stay put in my American-made GMC. It's been a good workhorse for a number of seasons. Now, a couple of additional headlines we are keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. And first up, the Trump administration announcing plans to add yet another militarized zone to our country's southern border by transferring oversight of the frontier between California and Mexico to the U.S. Navy. Moving along, the U.S. military seizing a large oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela and officials accusing the vessel of being part of illegal shipping network linked to foreign terrorist organizations, and the move further ratcheting up pressure on that guy, Venezuelan dictator Little Nicky, Nicolas Maduro. Your time is up, son. And in Europe, the head of NATO now desperately warning his allies to immediately begin preparing for World War III, something we were talking about just moments ago. Says the entire continent is now squarely in Russia's crosshairs. I believe that as well. They're making more progress at Ukraine every day, and that everyone should get ready for the type of widespread destruction endured by their grandparents. Referencing, of course, the big one, World War II. To the world of business now, and a quick glance at a couple of stories shaking the branches in commerce, also in trade, and a bunch more. And leading off, congressional Democrats claiming that since President Trump returned to the White House, his widespread tariff policies have cost the average American household nearly $1,200 apiece. Disney now announcing plans to invest $1 billion in OpenAI, the move adding legendary characters such as Mickey Mouse, Cinderella, and that guy, Luke Skywalker, to its revolutionary company's cutting-edge video generation tool. I love the toys. And shifting gears, a new study revealing that Tesla is now considered the most unreliable used car brand in America, placing it dead last in a consumer review of more than 24 different lines of automobiles. And now, a quick gander at a bit of rock and roll showbiz news, and we begin with a highly anticipated big screen reunion. Hollywood legends Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, his main squeeze at the movies. Miss Congeniality, I think they called her. They're planning to rekindle their old flame and appear together once again, and this time in a big-budget romantic thriller for Amazon MGM. The pair are hoping to piggyback on the meteoric success of their previous collaboration, Speed and The Lake House, with Keanu saying they've spent years trying to find the right project, which in my mind is kind of like code for they need another big movie payday paycheck. It's what you do in Hollywood. You find something that kind of works, you stick with it, and you milk it to death and try to make the next big billion-dollar blockbuster movie. I like that Keanu guy. Sandra Bullock, she's the real deal as well. They got some great chemistry on the big screen, and so long as it's not another bus movie, I'm going to sign off on it. And speaking of celebs, Time Magazine has finally named their Person of the Year for 2025. And in this case, the winner is an entire team. The organization giving their prestigious honor to the architects of AI. Fantastic. I'm a big fan of architecting. They say they're giving a bunch of people the award because basically this is the year when artificial intelligence took over the world. Well, congratulations to the architects of AI, whoever they are, for winning that big, fancy prize. Personally, I would have given the prize to a different architect, like that handsome character right there. His name is Frank Lloyd Wright. Had some very lovely designs. Or maybe to Mike Brady. He was the pretend architect on the Brady Bunch. But apparently Time Magazine knows more about architecting than I do. And now a story for the fans of the royal family. An extremely rare bottle of Dom Perignon champagne from the 1981 wedding of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, still on the market after failing to sell at an auction in Denmark. Officials, they say they were hoping to pocket more than 90,000 clams for the bubbly, but unfortunately, nobody made the minimum bid. Better news at another auction, however, in Dallas, a painting used for the original and iconic Star Wars poster is selling for just under $4 million, and that is the highest price ever paid for an item from a galaxy far, far away. It's no surprise that the bottle of overpriced carbonated grape juice didn't get any decent bids. And honestly, you can pick up a bottle of that Martinelli sparkling juice for about $2.98 at Walmart. Another thing, that bottle of bubbly, if we have a shot of that, that's from 1961. That's an old bottle. And the Martinelli's, that's brand new. Also, $4 million for a second-rate painting is a bit on the high side, especially since it deals with a little-known outer space movie, which came out a half a century ago. What was that one, Davey? Space Trek or something like that?
Bill, what are you? It's Star Wars, Bill. It's like the biggest movie franchise in the history of cinema.
Yeah, never heard of it. And now it is time for us to call it a wrap on the Thursday edition of the Big News Roundup. But before we go, and as we do each and every day right here on the program, I'd like to share with you a very notable quote. And this eye-opening quote comes to us today from Michael Douglas, who said, "If a deal looks too good to be true, it most likely is." Douglas is an iconic American actor and film producer who's bagged a couple of Academy Awards, including one for his legendary performance as the manipulative Gordon Gekko in that movie Wall Street. Didn't he have a famous quote in that movie, Davey?
He did, Bill. It was, "Greed is good."
Might be a little too soon, just in case that Tim Walz guy is listening to the program. Greed, and you know the rest. Now it is time for us to bust on out. But before we go, don't forget the News Roundup motto. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Instead, simply ask what you can do for your podcast. And all we ask you to do is simply hit that little subscribe button right over there. That way you never miss a single episode. That's a wrap. Have an awesome day today. Stay safe. And with that, we'll dim the lights. We're going to fade to black, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow afternoon. It's Friday, and the weekend is just moments away.